And scene.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have to say that part. Scene is what you say at the
At
end.
the end, yeah. And
So anyways, it's the RBT training for the behavior support plan and data collection. And we're going to start with an activity. So I just want you guys, and if you're watching the video, you can do this too, just count. So you guys are going to take data on hitting. Okay. Ready, go. Hi Cooper, how you doing? Oh, you're not gonna answer. Fine. I don't know why you're not talking to me. Hello? Hello? Okay, stop.
5.
5?
I mean, I was tallying, but I don't know what hitting was.
Good answer. How many did you get?
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, but only when you hit none.
14, and you got 5?
5 of when you hit it, but I did like
I think she did like instances. Yeah, you did instances. You did actual hits, right?
Yeah. But I mean, I was like,
That's the point.
yeah.
Okay.
Enjoy being your punching bag.
I know, I was like, it's like whoever doesn't have pen and paper is gonna be out of luck.
That really
hurt. So as you can see, they saw the same exact behaviors, 2 people in the same room looking at the same exact behavior, and one person got 5 hits and one person got, what did you say, 12? 14. So that's like a almost 300% difference. So we're gonna come back to this later. Where's my thing? Yeah. And if you heard Amanda say while I was tallying, talliate on this for a minute. I was tallying, but I didn't know what to count. Okay. So this, now that we've learned about how to approach target behaviors and challenging behaviors and how the behavior actually works, we're going to talk about the behavior support plan that is provided to you guys that every client will have when you're working with them. So behavior support plans are developed by the behavior consultant to guide all individuals who work with the client on how to decrease target behaviors and how to teach replacement behaviors, which shouldn't sound foreign to you because that's what all of the trainings have been before. All the trainings we've just done and all of the things you just learned are basically what the behavior support plan is going to be all about. You're not going to see anything too awfully foreign after understanding all of these concepts and principles. It's the behavior support plan is just putting it down on paper for a particular client. And so this could be called behavior intervention plan, a behavior reduction plan, individual support plan. If somebody says ISP or BSP, that's what they're talking about. Like what's in the client's ISP, that's what they're talking about. So behaviors included in a behavior support plan are behaviors that impede learning, impact social development, limit community involvement, could inflict harm on the individual, and could inflict harm on others. So obviously we're targeting these behaviors for reduction. This goes back to that social validity part of ABA, where as a therapist you're not going to be choosing the behaviors that we're targeting, so that will already have happened, but just FYI, we're not coming at them from a point of like, what's the most annoying thing this kid does? We're coming at it from a perspective of what behaviors can we change and in what order to make the biggest impact. So you might see behaviors like disruptive behaviors that are not in the plan. It's not because we don't think that those are important, it's because we've carefully considered the order to treat these behaviors and how to prioritize them. So each individual who maintains a professional relationship with the client should be trained on the BSP. This includes therapists, teachers, other professionals, and respite providers. This comes from the state, like this is a requirement. If anybody has regular contact and works with this person and we have a behavior plan for them, they should be trained on it. So that includes you as the therapist, so you should receive training. The way training looks here at Meaningful Day is the behavior consultant will provide a video, and so you just go in and once you've watched the video, you're considered trained on the support plan and taken a test. BSPs must be implemented consistently for them to be effective. If a plan is only implemented sometimes, that client will learn that they can sometimes use their target behaviors and gain what they want, which means we probably won't see very much change. If we don't implement the BSP, we won't be effective in teaching replacement behaviors. So included in the behavior support plan, these are the kind of the main parts: demographics, target behaviors, functions, replacement behaviors, proactive strategies, and reactive strategies. Oh, I should have gotten something first. So this is kind of like the process that you go through, that the BSP should go through. It's developed by the behavior consultant in the early stages when our client is attending, or before, usually before. And then we train all the staff, and the staff implement it, and then like we talked about in our very first training, then we collect data on the plan to see if it's working, like all those things we looked at, like is this, or else is assignments being completed. That's what that data collection is for. So data allows a behavior consultant to analyze the client's progress. We talked about this already. We need these numbers and graphs to analyze progress. Behavior analysts don't use subjective measures of behavior to determine change. So an example of subjective behavior, and this is usually what people typically use, like, teachers and parents are like, oh, I think he's doing better. And that, sometimes you can have a good idea of that, but not always, because like we talked about, these behaviors are very intense for family and caretakers, and so when they happen, it makes it seem like this is awful. And sometimes parents want to see progress too, so sometimes they might say like, yeah, he's getting better, because they want to see it, and maybe they're not. So it could go either way, but we need this data to be able to say with certainty what is happening. So the data can show us if a behavior is increasing or decreasing. It can show us topography changes. Sometimes if we collect additional data, and it can show function changes, your data sheets will have a place for you to write the antecedent and the consequence, and that tells us like, oh, they're starting. Before it was always downtime when they would engage in this behavior, and now they're starting to engage in it when there's a task. So that can tell us, now we have an escape function as well. The data allows the behavior consultant to make informed decisions about programming, mastery criteria, and when to make changes, which is like the main part of ABA. So different types of data collection. We can do ABC recording. We haven't gone into detail about this, but ABC recording is when you basically write down antecedent behavior consequence for a behavior. You guys do something like this when in the emergency folder you're recording their target behaviors. There's also a place to do the antecedent, write a little code for it, and a place to do the consequence for it. You're basically taking ABC data so that we can, even though we've already identified the function, we really just want to count if the behavior is decreasing. But if there are changes to the function, then we need to know, because that totally might change our intervention. Time sampling. Partial interval. Yeah. I was like, what's the here? So time sampling is not something that you're ever going to do as a therapist, but we are going to talk about it a little bit, because certain programs have you take data by interval. Event recording simply means that you just count the behavior, like did it happen or not happen? Oh, it happened, that was an event. It happened, it happened, it happened. And permanent product is nice, because that means you take data by something that has created the behavior. So if a kid does a math worksheet and you want to count how many times they did math facts correctly, you count, and it makes data collection much easier. Let me see if I need to. Oh, like after they.
Yeah, you should.
She has before.
No, we should tell. I'm saying we should just tell them again, like just because it looks like a scrap piece of paper, keep them.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and then that way only the program specialist will know. I'll add it to the agenda for Tuesday.
So I'm just going to do a little tiny demonstration of what time sampling looks like. Time sampling, say like, okay, I want you to record how many hits, or I want you to record like how many times I engage in hand flapping. So both of those things can be hard to like, what am I counting? Am I counting every time a hand goes up and down? Like, am I counting when you stop and start again? So some behaviors are really like, if it's like this, how many hits was that? So sometimes it's easier to say, I'm gonna watch you for 2 minutes and I'm gonna set a timer to go off every 10 seconds. And when it goes off, I'm gonna say it happened or it didn't happen. And so you don't get an exact count of what the behavior is, but you get a good estimate. Yeah. You get, so say, just beep every, like, count 5 seconds and then beep.
Okay.
So we're gonna use time sampling for hitting. Ready, go.
Beep.
So that would be yes, it happened.
Beep.
It happened.
Beep.
It happened.
Beep. It happened.
It happened. See?
Oh. Beep. Didn't happen.
It didn't happen. So basically it makes it much more simple to count behavior like that that's difficult to determine when the beginning and end is, but you know, like, it happened during that interval. And so then that was 5 intervals, it happened 4 out of 5 times, so we can say the behavior's happening roughly 80% of the time. So that's what that is. The way this translates for you guys when you're running programs is sometimes, say you have a program for independent play, so you're going to set a timer for 5, or you're going to set a 30-second timer, and you're going to say, go play Legos. You're going to watch your kid, beep, independent play happened the whole time. 30 seconds, beep. It might not beep, but it's like buzzing or something. Independent play happened the whole time. 30 seconds, beep. No, they got up and run away and you had to redirect them. It didn't happen. So at the end of 5 minutes, you're going to have 10 pluses or minuses, and you're going to be able to say like, okay, well, they stayed there for 3 minutes was the longest they did. And when it says partial interval or whole, PIR and WIR, partial interval is what we did the first time, where we say like, did it happen at all during the interval? Yes. Whole interval, when you're seeing something that you want to happen a lot, like independent play, you say like, yeah, it happened the whole time. Yeah, it happened the whole time. So when you're using programs, you're doing that. You're saying like, I saw that behavior the whole time during that interval. You know, with maybe there's reasonable little breaks, but data collection. So we can collect data across many different dimensions of behavior: frequency, duration, intensity, and rate. So some things matter more. The big difference is kind of between duration and frequency. Would you measure how many times someone studied? Like, okay, I have a test tomorrow. I'm going to count how many times I studied today.
No, you
Studied one time. You count how long. And for sometimes with tantrums, it's like, we're going to count tantrums, and this kid had a tantrum every single day for 2 weeks. But it doesn't tell us that they started out as 3-hour tantrums and now they're down to 5 minutes. Yeah. So that's something you might see. We don't do too much of that because it's harder and it takes a lot of time away from your time with the kid, but that is a possibility. Sometimes you can measure intensity, and this you sometimes just do anecdotally, talking to the behavior consultant. Like, we have one kid right now whose behavior is decreasing, but the intensity is going way up because it's hitting and it's getting harder and like real hitting. So that we know just by saying, like, talking to the therapist and saying like, hey, it looks like it only happened once and it's been happening 1 or 2 times a day, but in the past 2 weeks now he's punching me in the face where before it was a slap on the arm. So that's important information that you will have that you're not necessarily going to record, but you might want to write it in the notes. So data collection procedures. Data is collected on antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. Some forms have sections to write comments about the behaviors, so that's where you would do things like intensity or duration. So say you're counting tantrums, if it lasted 30 minutes when it usually only lasts 2 or 3, then you would run like, extra long. So any additional information that you think might be helpful. Or sometimes data is collected for a certain time period or a set time. That's what we were talking about, the partial interval, whole interval, where you're like, I'm going to watch for 5 minutes and I'm going to count these intervals. That can be useful we might ask you to do that when, so say compliance is a replacement behavior, like you want your kid to follow instructions to replace non-compliance. Some of our kids are compliant, 95% of the time, and then it's that 5 times out of 100 that they have a big meltdown. So sometimes compliance can be really hard to track. We might ask you to do it like track compliance for 5 minutes and present demands during those 5 minutes and see how you do. Data is collected based on this is a permanent product, so that can be really useful. We were just saying that we should try to incorporate that more often because it allows you to direct your attention towards your kiddo rather than towards the data. If you can just like, okay, I'm going to take your worksheet and I'm going to grade it after. So that is something that the behavior consultants will try to implement, so that like a worksheet or a completed project. Something also like making the bed. There's a permanent product for that. Like you can see how well they've made the bed. Instead of taking data on did you do step 1, step 2, step 3, you can look at the bed and say like pillows in correct place, cover sheet on, nothing on the floor. So stuff like that. So data collection is the most important part of making changes in a client's plan or programming. Like if we're going to make these changes, we have to base it on something like, legally, maybe not legally, but legally and according to insurance companies, like we're providing ABA, and a defining feature of ABA is data collection and tracking behaviors. So if we ever were audited and found out like why were these changes made to this plan, we have to show it somewhere. So if you're telling us like this behavior is getting much worse and the data looks the same, we're going to be in like a hard spot. And that's where we have that conversation like, well, the duration is increasing, so like maybe we'll change the duration so we can show in our plans and in our data that we do need to make changes. So accurate data collection occurs when, this is when we get back to our little demonstration in the beginning, occurs when you know the operational definition, you know the dimension you're measuring. So if I said like, hey, track screaming, and I say like, "Wah!" and I scream for 20 seconds, you have to like, am I timing it or am I counting it? Because if I count it, I say it happened once. And if I'm timing it, so you have to know what that is. Usually you'll be counting behavior. We rarely have staff do. Accurate data collection also occurs when you can actually identify the occurrence of a target behavior. That goes back to knowing the definition. Like when Amanda said, I don't know what hitting is. Like she said she didn't know if it counted hitting the table or hitting a person. And then you record the occurrence, and then you fill out data sheets correctly. This is like a little kind of just a housekeeping thing, but if sometimes the data sheet, a person forgets to write their initials, but that can be really important because if you remember the example where we looked at mom spanking and dad spanking, like just knowing what those data points were changed everything. Like now we know what the issue is. Maybe it's a data collection issue, maybe it's not. So if we see two therapists having like radically different behavior, there's a lot of things that could be, are they responding differently? Are they just counting it differently? And so just those little things like writing the date, things like that can give us a lot of information. Like what if the behavior's awful on Mondays because it's like, the time off. And then knowing the prompting hierarchy, I'm not quite sure what she put that. I know what she means.
How we're prompting.
So, and this is not about problem behavior, but when you're taking trial data, understanding when you're prompting and when you're not prompting. Because sometimes you can be like, they did it independently, but you gave a little tiny Hint. Yeah, you maybe gave a little look. So we did our data on hitting. Now we're going to do it again. And this time you guys are going to get a better definition. So hitting is defined as forceful contact with open or closed hand with another person. It does not include hitting objects. It does include hitting yourself. A new instance of hitting is counted when no hitting has occurred for 5 seconds. So that's putting that barrier on of instances. Like if I go, that was just once because it didn't stop for 5 seconds. If I go like, that's just once because it wasn't 5. If 5 seconds pass, then I count again.
So if you hit continuously for 10 seconds,
Once.
but then you pause. Okay.
And the pause has to be 5 seconds, yeah. Okay, so now we can do it again. Cooper. I won't hit.
That's okay. It didn't hurt me.
Okay, I was like, is
No, I
that
was just kidding.
is that good? Does it look like it?
Get over here.
Got a close up of that arm.
Huh?
Got a close up of that arm.
Sorry.
Okay. Ready?
Scoot up.
Oh, hello, Cooper. How are you doing today?
Hey.
Hey. Oh, you're so silly. That's pretty good. Ugh. This is a really good presentation, guys. Like bipolar, apparently.
Love you.
Hey. Okay, stop. How many?
3,
I had
4.
I had 3.
You had 3. Well, 3 and 4 is much better than 14 and 5.
Yeah.
Right.
And if it would have gone on longer, and the difference was still only 1, like with 9 and 10, that's still much better than 4 and 5. Because if we saw 5 and 14 on different days for data collection, that would be like, change the plan,
Yeah.
change how we respond. And
Even
like
if it
maybe
was
it had
really
nothing
working.
to do with that. Yeah. So, the takeaway is, as a therapist, you're not writing those definitions. So it's not on you to write a good definition. That's on the behavior consultant. But it is on you if you don't understand the definition when you read it, to clarify. And the place you go for that, number one, you could go to other therapists first thing. The best place to go is to the behavior consultant, because then they'll know that there is a question about it, and then they can tell the whole team. If you're doing therapist to therapist, like, okay, maybe now you two are on the same page, but everybody else should really be on the same page too. So just a little review. The behavior support plan identifies target behaviors, replacement behaviors, proactive strategies, and reactive strategies. All behaviors need to be trained. All individuals need to consistently implement. That's another thing where the therapist's responsibility is not to write a good plan, but it is your responsibility to, like, if you don't understand any of the procedures or whether or not you're doing it correctly, you do want to reach out to programming specialist, programming coordinator, behavior consultant, whoever, because maybe another therapist has already asked that question and they just have the answer. Or maybe if you talk to another therapist, they'll say, like, I don't know, good question, this is what I've been doing, and then you say what you've been doing, and then you're like, oh, it's totally different, let's figure it out. You have to know what data you're collecting, accurately collect the data, and remember that data allows the behavior consultant to analyze progress and make changes. So if you ever feel like you're not taking data correctly, you don't want to be like, oh, I maybe took that wrong, I might get in trouble, so I'm just going to leave it. Like, that's totally not a thing. Like, no one's looking at you till it'd be like, you missed that instance. That's not what, because they had a good definition and they were still one off from each other. So it's never going to be super perfect. It's not about like, oh my God, it's about like, you know, are we looking at the same thing and are we defining it the same way? So last little activity. It's right in front of my face. Okay. So. Okay, ready? Cooper, what are the most important parts of a BSP?
The proactive reactive strategies and targeted behaviors.
Okay. That took 6 seconds, and it was mostly accurate.
Right, mostly?
I have other ones on there.
Okay.
Those are the very main ones. But so, 6 seconds. You did it really fast. You were supposed to do it way more slowly.
Slow.
Yeah, I would have
Well, you knew I was being timed, and I was like,
Proactive. Well, we'll do it. Okay, so that was almost 7 seconds. We'll call it 7 seconds. There are more on my official list. So, Courtney, what are the most important parts of a BSP?
Well, I have written down target behaviors, so I guess I would base off. I can't help but base off the person. Target, replacement, and proactive. But then also the operational definitions. That way we know what to track.
That took 20 seconds. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Those are good too. I still have. Well, I think you said proactive or target, replacement, and proactive.
That's what I said.
You said
That's
reactive too.
I said
You said
proactive,
reactive.
reactive.
So that's
proactive,
21.
reactive, and target behaviors is what I said.
And she had a replacement.
Yes.
And operational.
Yes. Okay, Amanda.
Operational definition, antecedents and settings, proactive strategies, replacement behaviors, I don't know, target behaviors.
12.
Sorry, I was like, I don't even know where I was.
Well,
you did also
that's
do
the
the
one.
ABCs, right? I mean,
I wanted to have a good baseline, so I didn't give the real list because I cheated. But I mean, like, I feel like if we went out on the floor and said, "What are the most?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be before this training at all. So if we went out there and said, like, when you look at a BSP, what are you looking for?
It'd be like target behaviors.
What's a BSP?
and then-
Right.
Yeah. No. hopefully I
reactive
wouldn't say what's a-
strategies.
Yeah, that's
Probably,
what
I
they
mean-
look
Rea-
like.
yeah.
I mean, I can tell you the template, which is like,
Right,
you know.
which is a lot of things. So the ones that and this is just me, but I feel like this covers it, and that one that nobody said was risks, which is also probably because I didn't go over it in this training, and it's not technically, they are in the BSP.
Function.
Like the risk plans.
Risk plan. So in addition to a BSP, some clients have a risk plan if they have significant risks that we need to know about it, like allergies, elopement risks, seizure,
Choking
medical,
hazards.
choking hazards, stuff like that. So it's in the same place as the BSP is. It's in the emergency folder. So those are things you need to know before any session with a kiddo because they can be pretty serious.
Very serious.
And then so in the BSP itself, and they will be mentioned in the BSP.
Yeah.
Like even though they're thoroughly in a risk plan, and then in the training video, we talk about significant risks before we get into all the stuff,
Yeah,
right?
because we behavior consultants, we don't write the risk plans if
No.
they're medical.
Right.
Right,
No, we do write them if they're behavioral.
right. They're usually mentioned in the training video. And then so the main behavior parts, target definition, so the behavior and along with knowing what the behavior is, you want to know how to count it. The function, because that will help you. If you know the function off the top of your head, you should be able to respond without like, hang on, please, you're melting down. Let me go reference the plan. So you just need to know the function because you're not, even if you read the plan, you're not going to be like, on page 17, it said that I should, was I ignoring? Like, these things are going to be just knee-jerk responses, but if you know the function, you're going to be able to respond. The replacement definition, because you count that too, and then proactive and reactive strategies. So really 6 things. And I feel like those, if you can, when you're behavior support plans can be really long. We do an overview in the thing, but if for whatever reason there's not an overview and the big plan is in there, you just want to like flip. There's going to be all this information about a client. You really don't need to read that. It's, you know, you're going to have to get there 30 minutes early for one session. But you do want to know risks, targets, function, proactive and reactive. So, yeah. And then,
If you have any questions about the behavior support plan, just contact the
yes.
consultant.
Yeah.
And scene.
And scene. Now I do it. And scene. It already, oh no, it didn't stop. This.
It's not a touch screen.
Okay, Hannah.